So I want to talk about something that happened in Berea this week, because I don't think people fully understand what just went down. This isn't me hyping up a random practice visit. This is me telling you that the entire tone around the Cleveland Browns quarterback room shifted in a single afternoon, and it happened without a press conference, without a statement, without anybody planning it that way. All it took was one man walking onto a practice field. Shedeur Sanders didn't say a word into a microphone. He didn't call a meeting. He just showed up to watch his son throw footballs, and somehow that turned into the biggest story to come out of Browns training camp all summer. I want to break down why that happened, what it actually revealed, and why I think this moment matters a lot more than a lot of people are giving it credit for. Here's the setup. Shedeur Sanders is in a real quarterback competition right now, going up against Deshaun Watson, a guy who's still owed a mountain of guaranteed money and still carries the label of the guy Cleveland gave up everything for. Every single rep in that quarterback room is being logged, dissected, and argued about online. That's the environment Shedeur is operating in before his father even steps foot on the property. Now add Coach Prime to the mix, and you've basically lit a match next to a gas leak. The second word got out that Deion was in the building. Cameras swung his direction. Reporters started firing off posts. Players were getting pulled aside and asked what it was like having him around. And just like that, what should have been a routine day of camp turned into the headline of the week. I need you to sit with that for a second, because this wasn't manufactured. Nobody scheduled this moment for attention. It just happened because of who Shedeur Sanders is. And that's the part I think gets lost. This isn't some random football dad standing behind the ropes with a cup of coffee. This is a Hall of Fame corner, a two-sport legend, and a working college head coach who has built an entire program around developing quarterbacks under pressure. When a guy like that watches practice, he's not just proud, he's evaluating. He knows exactly what a real competition is supposed to look like versus one that's just being called that for public relations. He knows how reps get distributed when a team is being honest, and he knows what it looks like when a team is protecting a decision it already made. So when Deion shows up, the Browns don't just get a visitor, they get a witness. And that changes the pressure in that building instantly. Now, here's where it gets really interesting to me, because the most telling moment of the entire day didn't come from Deion at all. It came from Todd Monken. Reporters asked Monken about Deion being at practice, and he had every opportunity to give the safe, forgettable answer. It's great to have him around. Moving on. That's the easy out. That's what most coaches do. Instead, Monken lit up. He basically said, "Are you kidding me? That's Shedeur Sanders." And then he kept going. He didn't just acknowledge the Hall of Fame resume. He specifically brought up how well Deion raised Shedeur, and he called Shedeur a great kid. Stop and think about what that actually is. That's not a coach dodging a question. That's not political spin. Monken didn't say Shedeur's beating out Watson. He didn't hand him the job right there on the spot. But he did something that I think matters just as much in a battle like this. He publicly vouched for Shedeur's character, and he gave Deion credit for building it. In a quarterback competition, that's not nothing. Coaches aren't just grading arm talent and footwork, they're grading who can handle a building like this one, who can take criticism without folding, who shows up locked in every single day regardless of what's being said about him outside those walls. And Monken basically told everybody, without saying it directly, that he sees that foundation in Shedeur already. I think that's the real story hiding underneath the viral photos. Deion's presence didn't create Shedeur's composure. It explained where it came from. This is a young man raised inside pressure his entire life. He didn't get introduced to scrutiny in Cleveland, he grew up under it. Cameras, criticism, doubters lined up around the block waiting for him to fail. So when the noise gets louder here, and it's about to, this isn't new territory for him. What really strikes me is how Monken handled the moment itself. He wasn't stiff. He wasn't guarded. He didn't treat Deion like an outside distraction he had to manage. He leaned into it. There was no tension in that response, no attempt to keep his distance, no coded language trying to downplay the visit. What I heard in that answer was one football mind respecting another football mind. Two guys who've both spent years grinding through development, pressure, and public judgment, standing on the same field and understanding exactly what that costs. Some people online were ready to spin this into a controversy before it even happened. They wanted the storyline where Coach Prime rolls into Berea and creates chaos, where the coaching staff gets defensive, where reporters chase some manufactured beef between father and franchise. That's not what happened. What happened was mutual respect, out in the open in front of cameras that were absolutely expecting drama and didn't get any. But let's zoom out, because the bigger issue here isn't really about the visit itself. It's about what this visit forces the Browns to confront. Deion didn't need to demand anything from Andrew Berry. He didn't need to challenge Monken publicly or question how reps are being split. He didn't have to say a single controversial word. His presence alone did the work. Because everybody in that building now knows that a man who fully understands quarterback development is watching, up close, with a trained eye that can't be fooled by vague talking points. Think about what that means practically. Every decision the coaching staff makes now gets a harder look. Who's getting first-team reps? Who's throwing with the better protection in front of them? Who gets patience after a bad rep and who gets pulled? Those small, quiet decisions usually tell you more about a real depth chart than any official statement ever will. And now there's a Hall of Famer with a coaching background clocking every single one of them. I'm not saying the Browns are rigging this. I have zero evidence of that. But I am saying they created this pressure themselves the moment they called this an open competition while still carrying a quarterback with a contract that large on the roster. You can't have it both ways. You can't say it's wide open and then get uncomfortable when people start watching closely to see if that's actually true. Andrew Berry has kept his language broad on purpose. Cleveland is going to go with whoever the staff trusts the most, whoever gives them the most comfort heading into the season. Fine. That sounds reasonable on paper, but comfort is a word that can mean anything you want it to mean. It can mean performance. It can also become a convenient shield when an organization doesn't want to explain why one guy keeps getting more rope than the other. That's why what happens on the actual field has to speak louder than anything said in a press room. If Shedeur is moving the offense, protecting the football, and running things with control, Cleveland can't wave that off just because Watson's been in the league longer. And if Watson is clearly outplaying him, then fine. Say that plainly. Just don't hide behind vague language either way. Here's why I think Deion being in the building makes that kind of dodge a lot harder to pull off. He's not walking in with rose-colored glasses. He's coached his son hard for years. He knows Shedeur isn't perfect. He knows the NFL demands faster processing, cleaner protection calls, sharper timing, and total command of an offense that college football never fully prepares you for. Deion isn't going to see one nice completion and declare victory. He understands exactly how much grinding this position requires at this level. And that's what makes him such a dangerous presence if anybody in that building is trying to sell a story that doesn't match what's actually happening on the field. If Shedeur's earning it and still getting passed over, Coach Prime is going to see it. And once he sees it, everybody else eventually will too. This also puts real weight on the locker room dynamic. Players notice things that never make it into a press conference. Who commands the huddle with actual conviction? Who bounces back clean after throwing a pick instead of unraveling? Which quarterback the offensive line starts trusting on protection calls? Coaches can control the depth chart on paper, but they can't fully control what 30-some grown men see with their own eyes every day. If Shedeur keeps building that trust, it shows up eventually, and it doesn't need an announcement to do it. Now let's talk about Shedeur directly, because I think there's a version of this story where all the attention becomes a trap for him, and I want to be honest about that risk. With his father now visibly present and every camera in Ohio pointed at this competition, every mistake gets magnified. Every bad throw becomes a headline instead of just a rep. Critics are going to look for any excuse to say he's uncomfortable, that he's getting special treatment, that Deion's presence is somehow a distraction rather than a support system. He can't control any of that noise. What he can control is the very next snap in front of him. And honestly, I think this is where his upbringing actually becomes an advantage instead of a liability. He's operated with cameras on him his whole life. He's played through years of people debating his last name. his confidence, his swagger, whether he deserves what he's been given. He already understands that chasing validation with one flashy throw is a losing formula. The answer isn't some hero ball moment to prove a point. It's the boring stuff. Execute it over and over. Complete the layup throw. Make the right read. Protect the football. Run the offense the way it's drawn up. Do it again the next play. That's how quarterbacks actually win competitions like this. Not with a highlight reel, but with consistency nobody can argue with. And here's the thing about Coach Prime that I think people miss. He can't throw a single pass for his son. He can't read a blitz for him. Can't check into a better play at the line. Can't command that huddle from the sideline. None of that is his to give. What he can do, and what he clearly already did just by showing up, is make sure nobody in that building or in that fan base gets to look away from this competition. He forced the volume up on a story the Browns might have preferred to keep quiet and controlled. Because let's be real, Cleveland would probably love to handle this the boring way. Talk about steady growth, learning the playbook, letting the process play out on its own schedule, no urgency, no drama. That's the corporate version of a quarterback competition. But that's not the world we're in anymore. Not with Shedeur Sanders involved, and definitely not with his father now part of the conversation. Every single day without a clear direction is going to generate more speculation. Fewer reps for Shedeur. People ask why. A strong throw from him. Fans want to know if he's climbing the depth chart. A rough day from Watson. The questions get louder immediately. Monken praises one guy. It gets read as a signal. Monken praises the other guy. People wonder if the front office is just protecting its investment. There's no neutral ground left in this story, and Coach Prime's visit just made that reality impossible to ignore. I also want to point something out about the contrast between these two quarterbacks, because I think it's the real engine driving all this attention. Watson represents a decision the organization already made, one that came with enormous money and enormous risk attached to it. Every time people evaluate him now, it's tangled up with what Cleveland gave up to get him, and whether that gamble can still be salvaged. Shedeur represents something completely different. He represents possibility. He represents a fan base that's desperate for a new reason to believe in this franchise's future. That's why the media keeps circling back to him. And it's not just because of his last name. It's because his story offers Cleveland an escape hatch from the version of the future it's currently locked into. There's also a fair conversation to have about the difference between genuine attention and unnecessary distraction, because critics will absolutely try to blur that line. They'll argue the Sanders family brings too much circus energy, that every practice becomes a show, that every offhand comment turns into a headline. But attention only becomes a real problem when a player can't handle it, and I haven't seen anything from Shedeur that suggests he can't. He's operated under a magnifying glass for years now. He expects the scrutiny. He expects people questioning his confidence and calling it arrogance. The only real answer to any of that noise is performance, plain and simple. Keep playing well enough that the results speak louder than the narrative. And honestly, that spotlight might end up working in his favor more than people realize. The brighter the lights get, the harder it becomes for Cleveland to quietly bury a strong performance. If Shedeur is consistently sharp, in control, and building real trust with his teammates, that's going to be visible to everyone, not just to whoever's writing the depth chart. The Browns can manage the official announcement all they want, but they can't manage what everyone around that building is watching happen in real time. At the end of the day, here's what I keep coming back to. This entire moment wasn't really about Deion Sanders showing up to watch practice. It was about what his presence exposed. It exposed genuine respect from his head coach. It exposed the foundation Shedeur was raised on, one built around discipline, expectation, and the ability to function inside chaos most rookies have never experienced. It exposed just how much pressure the Browns put on themselves the moment they decided to call this competition open, while still holding on to a massive financial commitment to the other guy in the room. None of that hands Shedeur the starting job. His last name doesn't complete a single pass. His father can't read a defense for him or bail him out on third down. That part is entirely on Shedeur, snap after snap, day after day, whether the cameras are rolling or not. But what Coach Prime's visit did was strip away any excuse Cleveland might have used to quietly avoid making a real decision. Everyone's watching now. Every rep counts a little more. Every explanation from the coaching staff needs to hold up under a lot more scrutiny than it did a week ago. There's one more piece of this I keep thinking about, and it's the timing. This didn't happen in week 1 of camp when nobody's paying close attention yet. It landed deep enough into the process that real patterns are already forming, deep enough that reps are starting to matter toward an actual week 1 decision instead of just building fundamentals. That's not a coincidence I can just brush past. And I think about Watson in all of this too, because it's easy to only talk about Shedeur's side of the story. Watson didn't ask for a rookie with a Hall of Fame father to walk into camp and turn every single practice into a referendum on his own job security. He's dealing with his own version of pressure, trying to prove his body and his game are still what Cleveland paid for, while the loudest storyline in the building has nothing to do with him at all. That's exactly why the standard has to stay consistent, no matter which quarterback it favors. If Watson clearly plays better and wins the job outright, the staff needs to explain that in plain football terms, not by leaning on service time or financial investment as a tiebreaker. And if Shedeur keeps closing the gap, the organization can't quietly slow play him just because moving on from Watson complicates a story they've been telling for 2 years. Whichever way this goes, the reasoning has to hold up under real scrutiny. So here's my real question for you. Did Deion Sanders showing up in Berea help his son by bringing him support and confidence at exactly the right moment? Or did it just pile even more weight onto a young quarterback who was already carrying one of the biggest spotlights in the entire league? I honestly go back and forth on it. But one thing I'm sure of, this quarterback battle in Cleveland just got a whole lot more interesting, and I don't think either side is backing down from it anytime soon.